What's good, y'all? What's good? I am back. I am back and ready to go along. I was going to do an interlude where we can have a break, but the universe just did that for us. So right there, and we're gonna go right back. But I'm very excited because I have come up with a genius solution to. Oh snap! I'm looking at myself and myself. I have come up with an ingenious solution to make sure I don't get interfered. And it's going to work, so I don't really care anymore. But this is interesting. You can see me in the chat, and I wonder why it's showing you, because normally it doesn't show you. But anyway, that's the ingenious solution. I have the my laptop down here, so if for some reason this goes out, I'll just be able to switch it and I can go on my phone. So they're not gonna stop us. They're not gonna stop us this time. I would like to get rid of this now, but I don't really care anymore. It is what it is. If that has to be how it is. I just hope it's not distracting for y'all. But anyway, that being said, where I left off was Mars in Synastry. And Mars in Synastry is going to segue into the greater planets that we have. Oh, okay, that's also that. And yeah, further with that though. There will be some of you who are watching this live or who are watching this video after the interference from part 1. So if you are not able to make it to the Q&A, then definitely feel free to email me below at thepeacedealer@gmail.com. All right. And if you are not able to make the Q&A and you need somebody, you need a question. Sorry, I'm a little zoned out. If you weren't able to make the Q&A and you watch this video after, you can totally ask the question as long as it's related to Synastry. Just one question to thepeacedealer@gmail.com. I once again apologize for this technological mishap. I have found a way to combat this. So this is something I don't really see becoming much of an issue now moving forward. Let me charge my phone too. So, okay. With that being said, I'm going to continue with Mars. So these interpretations apply as much for transits as much as they do for the natal or progressed aspects. And yeah, just like Jaiwan said, take that, dark forces. I think I even know, maybe it's another content creator that's taken, but I won't say names. Regardless, just to give a brief overview, Sun and the Moon, and how it has much to do with your soul and your spirit being heavily influenced when it comes being aware of another facet of someone's life or being receptive of another facet of someone's life, in the sense where you're absolutely in tune to the secrets of their soul. In that sense, once we now incorporate Mercury, Venus, and Mars, this is going to have a profound effect to allow us to examine and experience the quality of someone's mind and how they communicate with you in a relationship, what they find beautiful, and how they compromise with you in a relationship, indicated by Venus, and how they how they act on their decisions, and how they have sex with Mars. What's very important, influence is when you notice contacts to personal planets that you have, more so than outer planets, this will also trigger certain instances or experiences in your life that set things off in motion. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. Aerial contacts, no matter what aspect, will stimulate your mind and have you perceive things. Martian contacts with other people's energy have much to do with how you're influenced by the way you act and how much sexual tension is built. You will see how with negative aspects, sexual tension can actually be built much stronger than when having to deal with the more positive aspects where they're free flowing. Now, once we shift out of Mars into the more like Jupiter and Saturn, one thing to keep in mind is that Mercury, Venus, Mars, Sun, Sol, especially in Synastry, but this is also an extension of astrology. These are influences that are within the human body. The planets' frequencies from space, but these archetypes are symbolized by certain decisions and characteristics that make up our personality. When we now talk about Jupiter and Saturn planets, it's outside of you. It's generational. It's different, especially because of how slow they move. Now, even though Pluto and Neptune are kind of just as much as inside you as Venus and Mars, when you talk about the deep unconscious motivations that Pluto represents, really affect us a bit differently. Saturn's influence is going to be more felt from an outer influence, where you feel responsibility weighing down on you. When you feel and see this as the externalization goes, Mars is very internal. It's the drive and passion that you take from inside. And this thing, potent and profound to adopt with whatever you do, because it is also going to highlight in a very powerful way how you're not aware of this just in yourself, but also how other people's karma and luck can affect you as well. So when we get to Jupiter, Jupiter and Mars are both kind of cool, where they add this exuberance to them. You know, Mars contacts in Synastry really speak profoundly of how passionate, or, you know, in some cases, irritating things can get. The dark side of Mars is where you can kind of fight this person because they just really get on your nerves. But Jupiter is going to add a wisdom. One of my favorite Synastry contacts I share with someone is with my little sister. Is on my Jupiter. So just like I said earlier, wherever someone's sun is, they energize and empower it. It's as if she channels my Jupiter. She has power over my Jupiter. And whenever I'm with her, I gain so much knowledge. I gain such an expansive understanding and awareness of how to even understand that part of my chart. So Jupiter kind of adds this guru-like wisdom to whatever it is you focus your mind to. It's very important and key, because you're not only like highlighting an ability to gain luck and abundance, and yes, Kimmy Cat, it is similar to the moon and Jupiter. It is. It's actually a very soothing contact. It's actually a very soothing contact. The moon person will feel like feeling into the God conscious. But mystery, but ultimately, that feared. Okay, this could honestly be okay, could be the difference between over like or whether you use it or not. But myself because it does say I'm cutting out. So is it still kind of cracky right now? Yeah. Oh wow. All right, I'm gonna switch. Let's see what that does. Hello. Now it's clear. Now it's clear.
Oh shit. All right, cool. Let's try it this way. So, let me know if you hear me and see me. If I'm gonna start so you can hear and see me. All right, cool, sweet. So we're on phone mode. I'm gonna just stick to this one for the rest of the around cast. Here and see, let's do it. So I'm gonna start back again from Jupiter. Jupiter, of course, will exonerate and add a lot of abundance. Do it this way. Jupiter, of course, will exuberate and add a lot of abundance to is kind of invested in and harnessed. Would expect it very much so is an expansion sign and an expansion energy. Expansion energy has much to do with
and abundance that's heavily influenced by the philosophies that kind of have raised that person. So has Jupiter and Saturn are actually very, in that they both have karmic aspects to them. Saturn is more the karma, where it's like you have to be responsible. Done. And Jupiter is more the karma that explains and also shows how profoundly one can actually gain luck when they're walking their destiny. So you have those two aspects of karma that we have these two aspects of destiny that we call karma and fate. Fate would be like Jupiter, karma would be Saturn. And when we deal with Jupiter's contacts to Synastry, they really do give us opportunities to come into a higher perspective and understanding in very wise and in open ways, but they could also lead to things blowing out of proportion. Even aspects as favorable as conjunctions could be negative if not necessarily harnessed with pure intent. That being said, Saturn is a lot more stabilizing, but even though Saturn is stabilizing in the level of which it's able to, very properly constrict the energy it's around, especially in the case of the conjunction, it teaches the karmic lessons through the energy. Is what's going to give the relationship an element of structure and order and completion too. Saturn is actually a very important planet in Synastry, especially if you're looking to longevity in a relationship in its aspect to an asteroid like Juno. Saturn will very potently and powerfully give you an understanding of your limitations through the person who you are with. Because individually, this is what it does for you. Now, how your limitations interact with another person's limitations could be what actually debilitates or brings the best out of both of you. This is where certain beautiful things could happen. Like you can have a negative relationship with Saturn, and that person can have a negative relationship with Saturn, but when you get together, you both actually get along with your Saturns because your Saturns get along. And this could work itself out to how two people are able to be accountable to each other, and Saturn will help them, work on their routine issues because they both are able to pull in that discipline. But as you would expect, Saturn contacts and Synastry are the source of all the conflicts and challenges that a relationship has to overcome so that the karmic lessons of the relationship will be overcome. When I do the next webinar on the composite chart, I'll talk more about how the composite energy blends with all this. But in a Synastry setting, looking at the aspects that each of the planets make, especially to Saturn, will show how the karmic lessons you face are interacting with basic facets of this person's personality. Once we now evolve and ascend, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we're now interacting with generational influences, but also very unique facets of the human psyche that really serve to make weird and strange human interaction. And this is really what can make or break relationships and can add elements of certain things that just really serve to add magic in some ways, if I can say so, but also freak and haunt. But what I mean by this is more so, for example, with Uranus contacts, the electricity that Uranus alone adds to a relationship could really, on a subtle level, dramatically impact anybody. So when applied to synastry, learning how to understand a person's Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto will really help you understand how to interact with not only them, but understand heavy core lessons. So in synastry, this is really going to be, oops, let me plug this back in. This is really going to be very relevant if you have conjunctions to your sun or moon or any personal planets. If Neptune or Uranus has any such conjunctions or features any such conjunctions, this is going to indicate quite profoundly the radical influence, otherworldly influence, and supernatural influence these individuals have. I've had direct up close encounters with people who have their suns or moons right on my Uranus or Neptune. From experience, especially since it was in the eighth, these are people who can take me to a depth that really now voice out my more, spiritual or mysterious inquiries or curiosities and whatnot. So Uranus in particular, the electricity that it brings is going to inspire a really huge level of unpredictability. In some cases, this could actually be a really bad influence, especially if Uranus makes a bad aspect, because people like this will lend to really having to deal with quite nefarious influences. At its best, however, it's going to speak profoundly of very enlightening people who kind of shock and reflect the God or higher frequency beings that are within you. What Uranus will seek to do is evolve and ascend. And because these are so subtle, these outer planets will usually work or channel through the people, just like the moon too. The first thing to keep in mind when you look at the synastry of Uranus or Neptune, you want to understand what generation is it in? Because normally Uranus and Neptune are probably going to be either like together, depending if we move in the future, Uranus and Neptune are all going to be like squaring each other, all the outer planets. So right now they're together or they're traveling together, but you really want to pay attention to what generation Neptune is, their Uranus is, and their Pluto is, because that's going to let you know the period of time and the lessons that they had to integrate with all this knowledge and with all this energy. So back to Uranus, there will be a subtle influence to really rebel together against, any establishment or usually against each other. And this rebellion doesn't have to really, be in a certain sense that it's for something grander than it is. The rebellion could be something as simple as I want to change the channel. Okay, Uranus contacts the synastry are going to keep things really on a higher fuzzy vibration. And even if it's not conjunct, it's still going to be something that influences the chart. So the way it works in tandem with Neptune will now literally now be where you get the psychic links. If you have someone whose moon is on your Neptune, this is someone who you have a deeper telepathic spiritual bond with. So you could just know why they're feeling certain things, as opposed to Moon and Uranus, which kind of will be telepathy, but just in a different way, where you just kind of don't know why you know certain things, and things kind of are pretty electric. Or, some of you are in a generation where you have your moon on someone's Neptune and Uranus. So it's kind of combining a whole lot of different facets. Neptune in synastry will really inspire you to tap in to your own divine energy through what is projected from the other or through what you project to the other. So a little bit of projection does not hurt when you deal with Neptune, as long as you don't attach to it. Whereas Uranus will make it very hard to attach. Neptune can make it very easy to stay delusional state. And Neptune in Synastry could be a very heavy source of deception. People with Neptune contacts can see that others can't, as well as what kind of motivates people to live their dreams in certain aspects. So that's a heavy dark side of it. The positive, what Neptune ultimately is for, is to help you ascend into a higher Christ consciousness. All right, and this is where Uranus and Neptunian contacts in Synastry really express their effectiveness. And if it's not really an influence that hits your personal planets, or if it hits like your sun and moon, you don't want to really see it as personal as like Mars, where even if Mars does not aspect a personal part of your chart, you still want to know how it's aspecting your chart. Okay. Pluto is a step above, where Plutonian contacts add a deep vulnerability and obsessiveness quality. People with Pluto on their sun can see through you. So if someone's sun is on your Pluto, and is your Pluto, then they add an intensity to where they're able to really like gain a depth of understanding to you that you may not even see, or vice versa. And with all these planets, that I said in Synastry, you'll notice that the more dominant energy they carry, the more you'll notice these influences. Like if you're with a Plutonian dominant individual, then you'll have to how compatible they are with your dominant energies, and how you'll be able to see, especially in element and state, these relate. Pluto contacts to Synastry actually can indicate very great areas of awakening through deep therapy or through intense trauma. Contacts will indicate profound level where somebody not only needs to transform, but where someone needs to purge a whole lot of unneeded, unnecessary energy. Psychological issues that Plutonian contacts in Synastry not only help people like uncover, it will make that unconscious conscious, triggering certain things. So that being said, once we get into the aspects of Synastry and how these energies influence the planet, and how these energies influence the planet or your own charts by how they kind of like dance in the skies with each other, this is where we now see the different combinations and how they very effectively predict or just explain in tandem what could be expected. Of course, the thing with aspects is a greater opportunity to come into a new meaning, because ultimately you experiencing the aspect, you're different from anyone else who is going to experience the aspect. So even though there'll be general facets and qualities that are the same, you could experience something unique, decide to twist it or experience it. But that being said, in Synastry, one major area of concern that you want to look at are conjunctions. Conjunctions and oppositions are the bee's knees. Before you really enjoy the trines and the sextiles, you want to pay attention to prevalent conjunctions, because conjunctions will show you and them are unified, where you both connect. I know a really amazing person who has her Jupiter on my Mercury, exactly, same degree. So whenever I'm in her presence, she just sparks my mind with concepts that just expand my mind. Like before I even have time to understand, to process what's going on, like my mind is just blown and blown and blown. And really, it's very stimulating conversation. But even though it's a conjunction, doesn't necessarily mean that it is always positive. It's generally positive because of the alignment, but if it's not balanced, energy wear out the other. In which case, because Jupiter is way bigger than Mercury, Jupiter will always kind of be overwhelming for a planet like Mercury. This, Ocean 420 said, outer planet conjunctions aren't a big deal because it's generational. And unless they aren't a big deal because it's generational, it's like to a personal planet. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. So Neptune conjunct Neptune, for example, like Jiwon asked. Let me just reiterate because that sounded confusing. Neptune conjunct Neptune, right? Outer planet conjunctions wouldn't be that big a deal because they're generational. So it would basically just be like you having the same class as somebody and you both study the same work. That's kind of like Neptune conjunct Neptune. You're just gonna be aware of it different, or you were both around people who had a certain fad. That's kind of how I see generational influences. Neptune and Uranus. Oh, the suggesting deeper psychic link with Neptune contacts was more Neptune on the moon, Neptune on the sun, Neptune on Mercury. So yeah, Neptune conjunct Neptune will probably strengthen the quality, but it's really more with the personals. But yeah, regardless though, general outer planets, you kind of want to see as generational influences where you have your personal understanding of events, but then you might have been influenced by an era of geniuses. You might have been influenced by an era where kind of, weird and it made people more crazy. These are Uranus Neptune outer influences. You might have been in a generation or era where there was war because Pluto was aspecting something. So this is what kind of makes the quality of the signs different and tempered differently. Regardless though, like I said, conjunctions are very potent. Some of the most important conjunctions being the sun and moon. When your sun is conjunct someone's moon, that is like definition of a soulmate bond. It is the real deal bond. It doesn't really even matter like how tight the conjunction is, because your spirit is now aligned with the other person's soul, gives a potent yin yang fusion. Another yin yang like fusion can be experienced with the moon and Mars. The moon and Mars is a lot more sexual. Definitely, it's a lot more emotionally sexual, but it does kind of represent a yin yang fusion in a sense. Of course, the favorite conjunction, is the Venus and Mars. This is going to highlight quite profoundly. You could experience passion and sex with the beauty. But let's rewind real quick and go through the planets. Conjuncts the sun in synastry. This is going to have much to do with your alignment of spirits. You're able to really kind of get each other without saying much, and it's very awesome aspects. This is why I love other Gemini individuals. All right. Long slide. What's up, colleague? And then when the sun conjuncts the moon, you're aligning your spirit with that person's soul. And this energetic fusion of energies really allows for very important facets to be fulfilled. Once again, on a yin yang aspect, where completely gain completion through a bond like this. It's one of the best synastry aspects ever, in my opinion. So when the sun is conjunct Mercury, the sun is going to provide great amplification to whoever has the Mercury aspect. And that person's mind is going to become more clear. They're going to become more aware of their thoughts and how they process information. Influence. When the sun is conjunct Venus, the sun is going to make the Venusian individual more aware of their heart. It's going to nourish the person's sense of beauty, but in a different way than the moon would, where it's affirming and adding a lot of light and positivity to that person's aesthetic of beauty. This is great for vibrant relationships as well, because it adds a lot of power. And it's not necessarily as spicy as Mars Venus. It is as powerful. It's actually very positive. When the sun conjuncts Mars, this is a very dynamic combination, and it really speaks to being able to energize each other. Also, Sun conjunct Mars is very powerful for sex as well. There's all this energy, you'll find that the Mars person is sexually attracted to the Sun sign, because the Sun sign brings the awareness of what the Mars sees as sexy or sees as, hot or attractive. So that's also very profound, whereas Venus will see the sun as beautiful, as the sun is the awareness of what beauty means to that Venus. It is on a person's Jupiter, like I highlighted. This is going to give a person the awareness of what their philosophy looks like. The sun as well will activate a greater ability for the Jupiter person to harness their luck. And you could actually feel like a good luck charm, like fortunate things will happen because the sun literally activates that Jupiter's energy. Important to know, because if the Jupiter makes horrible aspects, you might be triggering that when you're around them. And this is why things just blow out of proportion. You could be reasonable people individually on your own. When the sun conjuncts Saturn, this is going to really make aware serious commitments within people. For example, Capricorns who I know that have their sun on my Saturn is usually on my moon because they're together, but it adds a very powerful groundedness to a relationship to where you're both willing to not only commit, but agree and decide on very important issues. Of course, this will come with a power struggle because both the Sun and Saturn maintain a certain sense of dominance, and Saturn could be quite restricting of what the Sun may want to express. But actually, more often than not, this conjunction works together unless other aspects are ill highlighted. The Sun on Uranus is very electric. It's going to show you your genius and reflect it to you. But if you're the Uranus person, it'll activate that through the influence of the Sun, who's directly aware of that facet of you and brings it to life. That's the key thing with the Sun conjunctions that are awesome. And the Sun conjunct Neptune and Pluto will have a similar effect, but really highlight more subtle and unconscious influences. When the Sun is conjunct someone else's Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, this is activating a sacred and spiritual part of yourself that you want to be mindful of, because if you're not, delude you. Sun on Pluto contacts could really be very debilitating too, but ultimately they can be awakening if you see past any conflicts. And Sun and Neptune will really to the divine in your interactions in ways that really to situations and take away from them. Now, once we get to the moon, we're highlighting profoundly at great length receptivity with these aspects. You know what? No. Before I go to the moon, let me finish the sun, because I was going to do moon conjunctions, but aspects with the sun. So, or let me just do conjunctions. Yeah, let me just do the planets. So squares and oppositions now in a person's chart are going to highlight very important and profound challenges in astrology. Sometimes what a relationship needs more than anything is a square. More often than not, marriages or relationships will feature more squares than trines. Trine or sextile is what got them together, but they really got together because of the squares that they had to deal out. And so in that case, squares and oppositions are necessary to really build meaningful relationships, even though they can be challenging. Squares are only usually bad when two people refuse to compromise. Can be very great. For example, with Gemini and Pisces, those two energies square, but that combination of energies could be very divine together. Of course, and same with oppositions. Sagittarius and Gemini could work like very well, except when they clash, right? So you'll find that squares between fixed signs than squares between mutable signs because of the adaptability of the mutable energies. Squares between cardinal signs can get ugly. Also, they usually work super powerfully together. Regardless, when you have squares between any planets in synastry, both partners to take the same quality and state of what they possess with differing elements and now come to a way to where they have to balance it. This will usually be met with balance and timing, or rather, this will usually be met with timing and compromise, actually caring. When we get to the oppositions, this is an opportunity to complete the energy. And oppositions are actually more challenging than squares, but they're ultimately very rewarding when you're able to out the opposing element and sign completely with your own. You have to meet in the middle. Once again, oppositions are going to be very difficult for fixed signs and a lot easier for mutable and cardinal, although it can get very ugly with cardinal signs. We now bring into account the sun. When it squares these planets now, sun square another person's sun are going to indicate sun square another person's sun are going to indicate a difference in opinion when it comes to how one expresses their awareness. But what the square actually does is provide foundation for the other sun, for example. A sun square sun is going to provide a foundation for the other sun to kind of step on a platform and see. But clashes in awareness will now come when one person cannot really mix their element with the other. And because of the square influences, it's going to deal elements that do not naturally clash. So the water will be squaring a fire, or air, or earth will be square, or fire will be squaring water. That being said, when the sun squares the moon,
the awareness is supplemented by a receptive quality from the moon person. And whatever the moon person wasn't necessarily aware of, they can offer a different perception to the sun to see. But this could be challenging because sometimes the sun can be overbearing on the moon, and the moon may not be able to communicate to the sun in a way to where it could see what the moon is trying to say, as opposed to the conjunction where words don't have to be exchanged because they're just the same and aligned. When the moon squares Mercury, you could have to deal with an alignment in the need for what needs to be stimulated mentally and communicated, because the sun square Mercury will stimulate that person's Mercury as potently as a conjunction. But whereas the Mercury is already saying words that the sun was thinking, right? Or the sun can see what the Mercury is formulating, the Mercury square sun is going to confuse the sun by the words that are used because they don't necessarily align the same way. So, for example, a sun in Cancer is going to clash with the Mercury in Aries, who is more blunt with what they say, even though the sun may be aware of it in a more personal way. So this doesn't always lend to clash because, once again, these differences in elements and energies can actually work to create a greater cohesive whole. But there has to be a compromise in understanding, peace, Miss Kiki, in understanding how to, you know, be aware of what's being said, you know, coming around the corner and seeing instead of assuming. This is made even more relevant when the sun squares Venus and Mars, because it's going to indicate at a great level how a difference in beauty and action can make you not necessarily align to how well you desire a certain facet of that person's drive or passion or heart. Sun square Venus aspects in synastry could highlight differences of what one finds beautiful. And this is the exact same with Venus square Venus as well, or Mars square Mars. Sun square Mars could actually indicate aggression as well, where two people are not afraid to be openly antagonizing each other, because what one person is acting on the sun is kind of blocking the other from accomplishing. This will also be seen with Mars square Mars, but Moon square Mars also, this will be a lot more passive aggressive. When the sun squares Jupiter, it could expand upon the level of which one higher opportunities a bit too much, and it doesn't allow the proper amount of balance. Sun square Saturn can be very restricting on behalf of the Saturn individual, because now the sun is in a position that Saturn can't necessarily reach. And Sun square Neptune is equally confusing, because now Neptune is going to be in a position to really mislead what the sun thinks it's seeing. Sun square Uranus is very volatile, although it could force sudden breakthroughs in consciousness between both parties. And Sun square Pluto can do a similar thing too, but it's going to be very, difficult, very, very intense, but in dark ways that test how well you have control over your insecurities. The opposition, though, once again, will bring out more profoundly the opportunities that others have when it comes to these concepts and a lot of these energies. So when the sun squares any of these planets in astrology, it's going to take your awareness, see exactly what it is and need balance in. So for Sun opposite Mercury, you'll find that the way that person communicates adds to the what you're aware of in a way that completes your experience or understanding. And this is also seen by Mars and Venus by implementing the keywords, where the way that person acts or loves can balance out your general awareness, but block this if there's no compromise made, because now the way you're both do things in opposite ways can actually get in the way of you both understanding each other. This is important to know in cases where people are not coming together on, but they're coming together to fight, meaning to synastry, where oppositions will now indicate how both people pit each other against each other and how both energies will have to deal. The oppositions in astrology and synastry do show where two forces opposite each other and how they either have to compromise and dance together or like literally clash and fight. So when we speak of oppositions to Saturn, Sun, you're being aware quite profoundly of the limitations that this other person will you or kind of, you know, deeper issues with Pluto. Neptune can cause deception once again, but it can also mirror perfectly what it is you experience. In fact, Neptune opposite Sun in synastry is a very psychic link, and it adds a magical quality from that generational influence to help you see in a more unique way, even ignorance, which can accelerate one's consciousness, but provided they're able to kind of understand the other side of what the opposition teaches. When we get into trines and sextiles, these open up opportunities for others and yourself. Sextiles are actually really fun, but the thing here is trines are more romantic, trines are more fulfilling, sextiles are more friendly and fun, and kind of highlight and indicate at a greater level to deal with just such compatible energies that work very well together. When the sun trines the sun or the moon, all these facets of one's spirit and soul are finally able to work wonderfully together in the grandest of ways, and also in ways that highlight a highly important need for one to really embrace how deep you can bring out your full potential. So wherever the sun trines in any of the planets, whether it's Pluto, whether it's Uranus, whether it's Saturn, the sun will be bringing out its full potential, and vice versa. So it could even take something negative and bring it out. This is kind of why they say sometimes what two people have that they take for granted, because it's just so smoothly flowing. There's nothing that kind of gets in the way of it opening up. But this is where sextiles are fun too, because for example, when sun sextiles Mars, whatever Mars is ready to act on, the sun can complement it in a very powerful way that kind of gives it an awareness moving forward or kind of moving into it. Whereas sun sextile Venus really adds to one's sense of beauty by a greater vibrant awareness, to where between air and fire, they can add, the Venus and the fire sign can have that passionate flare, and the sun that sextiles it, somebody can kind of communicate or give ideas to the Venus individual on how to shine even brighter. Whereas the square, they may clash because the way that person shines bright kind of gets in the way of how the sun wants to be aware of it. But yeah, that's a basic look of how the sun will aspect these planets. When we now apply the moon with this, The moon is going to internalize quite profoundly a lot of these energies and give you quite literally a feel into what it is you're experiencing. What the moon also highlights is where you can get possessed by other people's energies. So if your moon is conjunct other people's personal planets or outer planets, then you can get possessed. You will literally feel that part of them. And depending on how psychic or spiritually, in attuned your moon is, will depend on if you can feel this miles away or whether they have to be there. So be very mindful, because your moon very much so is a sacred container. From other people to your moon will indicate where they fill that space deep in your soul. So someone's Pluto on your moon could be especially intense, and this could harness their tendencies. Whereas Neptune on your moon will give you a psychic link, and Uranus on your moon will give you a very electric connection that really doesn't incorporate certain conventional facets of psychic awareness and connection. Venus on your moon or Mars on your moon will add aggression and passion and beauty. The Venus moon conjunction is more kind and soft and soothing. The Mars moon connection is very sexual and emotionally passionate. Is also really cool, because the Mercury person will be speaking on things that the moon person feels deep inside, but it also stimulates at a more receptive level that person's, the Mercury person. Saturn is actually quite stabilizing, but it could be very difficult for the moon person, because they'll really feel hard that tightness that the Saturn is holding. It could be hard for the moon person to express towards the Saturn person. The sun and moon is a very potent connection, but yeah, when we now get to the squares to the moon, this could be very sensitive. Moon squares are not necessarily the best to have in astrology, because the moon is already sensitive enough as is. So moon squares could be where you take things very personally, especially a moon square Mars in Synastry. That Mars person could be very insensitive and take actions knowingly or unknowingly that will hurt your feelings, especially if it's a moon opposite Mars. When we now deal with Venus square Mars or Venus opposite Mars, we're dealing with different tastes. There's now a difference of taste. It's not necessarily as damaging. Venus, Mars, moon squared Venus, or moon square Jupiter, or Jupiter square Venus. These are more social differences of opinion to tastes. Not necessarily anything emotionally damaging. It could be a bit annoying, especially in a case of moon square Venus, where someone may offer up their affection, but you just may not be receptive to it. For example, when the moon is conjunct Venus, if someone were to give you a vanilla smoothie, your moon might just love it. But if it was square Venus, someone could make like casserole out of love, and you're just like, thank you, it's the thought that counts. This is where the differences kind of set in. Squares are very harsh when they have to deal with Mars, Saturn, and Pluto. Even Uranus could be a bit too much for the moon. And this could make it really hard with someone. So for example, this is why there's certain Aries or Libras that it's hard to really kind of be with or talk to, because it squares my moon in Capricorn. The square ultimately makes the experience a lot stronger but it adds this uneasy feeling to the moon sign person, where the other bigger planet is going to be dominant. That being said, in the case of sextiles, moon square Neptune, the moon will understand what Neptune is meaning to say different. So it leads to great deception. Now, in the case of sextiles and trines, the moon adds its emotional understanding and receptivity to actually add a lot of magic to the experience. Especially moon trine sun, or moon or trine like Venus or Mars. This adds such a very receptive quality to these passionate and beautiful parts of one person that it kind of adds to the feeling of the experience, and adds to the level of depth to which you can connect with these energies. Similar to the sun, the sextiles to the moon will open up opportunities, but ways instead of more expressive ways that open up great profound clarity for those to experience. Mercury conjunctions and squares, of course, or rather Mercury conjunctions and oppositions, will have to do with differences of how you can kind of understand what the hell people are saying. It's very hard for Mercury to understand someone when their Neptune squares that person's Mercury, because, or when their Mercury square, because they could be saying the same things, but they're using different words or different ways to say it, and the ways they say it to each other clash. So even though they're saying the same things, they think that they're arguing different points when they're really not. Mercury contacts, though, to other planets will, and the aspects that they have, really do well to like fine tune and align your mind, or just completely frustrate it completely. So when Mercury conjuncts, Venus or Mars, this is a very creative infusion of how you can now communicate and speak your heart or speak your actions. All right, Mercury and Mercury conjunct Mars can act and literally explain what it is they're doing as they do it, which is sometimes very funny. But when it squares Mars or Venus now, you know what I mean? When it squares Mars or Venus, it can kind of like it can kind of open up room for critique in unnecessary ways, and just kind of to the confusion that's occurring, because someone can kind of run to wrong conclusions about the way someone acts or loves because of the Mercury doesn't make a positive aspect. The opposition, of course, with Mercury will highlight profoundly what needs to be balanced so that a complete mental understanding can be gained. Of course, the quality of the planet will indicate the harshness of the opposition or square, but Mercury squares and oppositions will be difficult for Mercury to handle. The planet is. This is different for outer planets or a planet like Mars and the Sun that can hold their own. Venus, the Mercury, and the Moon will have to deal with struggle, becoming the dominant nature of these energies in squares and oppositions, and even quincunxes too. And synastry will indicate moments where one has to transform completely, connect with the other, and the other can very much so coordinate how. When we deal with aspects to Mars, Mars squares can set off a lot of confusion and arguments. And Mars oppositions could also spark off a lot of conflict, because whatever Mars opposes, it's going to want to attack. And this could really, if not balanced well, ruin rather positive relationships with positive potential in them. All right. That being said, obviously important to gain, important mastery of context to Mars. The conjunction Mars will make to Venus will indicate passionate love between two people, where the Venus person is actually wanting to receive Mars's aggression. Mars is, when Mars gets horny or when Mars gets excited, the Venus loves that. All right. And Mars is very excited about how Venus is receiving a whole lot of this passion. And when it squares Venus, this could be very tricky. Mars square Venus can now indicate a very potent clash that people kind of dance in this romantic tangle. What you'll find is that Mars square Venus is actually a little bit more potent than a conjunction, but because they're not necessarily aligned, it doesn't really flow as well, like the trine. So as long as there could be a timing balance, the squares between Mars and Venus can actually work. They usually don't, but any less sexual. And the opposition between Mars and Venus could actually be divine. It could be better than the conjunction if they're able to work through the differences. But the conjunction is usually the best. And this is similar to Mercury, similar to Jupiter, where Mars and contacts to Jupiter, aspects of Jupiter indicate how well one kind of aligns and spurs and motivates on, because Jupiter on someone's Mars will kind of expand more what they can do and push them further than ever, whereas the opposition can kind of get in their way, or the square can kind of blow things up more to proportion than they need to. Mars and Saturn is highly antagonizing unless it's conjuncting. This will add much structure to the way one's going to act and make sex, for example, very serious. But the opposition or square to Mars could be very troublesome, because now this person is inclined to agree with a lot of the decisions the Mars person is making. The trines and sextiles that Mars will make will open up the drive that Mars needs to accomplish, to act on. And sextiles will add so much abundant ways for all these planets to aid Mars or the Mars individual in the endeavors. And highly positive. But regardless, one important thing to keep in mind with aspects is that depending on who you are and what you represent, this is what's going to highlight very profoundly how you personally experience this. Right now, I'm going to move on to showing some and examples of positive synastry combinations and negative synastry combinations. And then I'm going to get into showing how you can pull up a synastry chart yourself and kind of know how to use this. In future webinars, I'm going to detail a lot more specifically the squares do with each planet and sign, as well as what they also interact like in sign. For example, I'm gonna say this one more time. In a future webinar that is also to do with the synastry, I'm going to detail more what the sun in aspect to Venus will do, whether square, opposition, I'm giving a brief overview and skimming because I want to show you and just give you a initial view over what you can notice that's similar between each of the planets, even though they do different things, how you notice like certain similarities, once again, between each of those energies. But yeah, also there will be a PowerPoint accompanied to do so. And thankfully, I will be using this laptop, so there will not necessarily be any more interference moving forward. But yeah, that being said, Lilac, yes, I will speak a little bit about houses as well. But before we do so, pull up chart. When it does come to the houses in synastry, this will indicate now, once you have a good understanding of how the planets work, where in your life all like you would expect play out, and how they work out, more importantly. So of course, the first house in synastry has everything to do with your identity. So if we look at the angular houses, when planets are in the angular houses or somebody's angular house in synastry, this is going to indicate certain facets that influence a person's identity, but as well the major parts of a person's life. When you have the sun or the moon in a person's first house, this is going to indicate ability for that person to make you profoundly aware of your personality. Whereas the moon person will feel into the way you definitely personally resonate with how a person expresses themselves. Mars and Venus will, through that person's passion, bring this out. But once again, planets in the first house are going to indicate how, and we're talking about someone else's planets in, say, your first house, will indicate now how that person's energy brings out your personality and reflects this. The fourth house will bring a feeling of a soulmate or a soul connection. So synastry contacts, or when you have planets, someone's planets in your fourth or someone's planets in their fourth, this is talking about energy that now links that to the depths of their consciousness. So planets in a person's fourth can engender great understanding, especially when someone has planets in your fourth house. They can use that energy to understand you. Seen quite profoundly with the moon in the fourth, which is a soulmate bond right there. One soulmate indicator, in a different sense, where that person at a deep emotional level, or even if the sun is there, makes you feel comfortable. This is someone who kind of can resonate with you at your private life. When we now talk about the seventh house in synastry, this is indicating quite profoundly what we know with relationships, where people's planets fall on your seventh house will indicate where they're able to balance you, but also of what you're missing. Even if you have personal planets there, you'll find the alignments there more, but the seventh house energy will now incorporate a sense of companionship to also bring you forward into a greater light. And this is where the 10th house synastry contacts are cool, because they really speak to bringing you to your best self. People with planets in your 10th house you look up to, because This is going to highlight how they bring their general awareness of their energies in your public life and bring out more of this energy within you and reflect it. Especially, let's say in the case of Saturn, if someone's Saturn is in your 10th, they're going to really help align with their goals, ways to construct your career ambitions where you might be lacking or where you might be aligned with. Whereas if the sun is there, you're going to see kind of what they're going to bring out more your 10th house, and you're going to see what it looks like for you and how you probably like or dislike certain elements of such. Now, when you have the synastry or planets in cadent houses, which I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure are the fixed houses, the second house, the fifth house, the eighth, and the 11th, this is where things get rather interesting. Planets in one's second house in synastry will indicate very profoundly how they influence your self-esteem. If a partner has a sign in your second house, or one to bring up Colleen's question, when you say it in your house, you don't see how that happens. If you said partner has a sign in, say, my first house, is this when their sign matches my sign? If a partner has their sign in your first house, it's not their sign in their first house, it's their planet that's going to be in your first house. So it's not about the sign matching, because if your first house is Scorpio, then if someone has a Venus in Scorpio, then their Venus is going to be in your first house. Unless it's, if it's actually in the first house bound. If you have all your first house in Scorpio and they have Venus in Scorpio, then their Scorpio is in your first house. Even if they have Scorpio in another house, that's kind of more how you see planets in houses instead of signs in houses. But yeah, when you have someone's planet seconds, they're going to stimulate and help understand how to bring out your self-esteem, your value, and your worth. And it's quite a fortunate position because contacts and synastry could motivate you to manifest and engender a sense of productivity with the individual. Although it could indicate people, because the person with planets in your second house, see how you can produce, take from thereof, or vice versa. For example, my younger sister, she is a Cancer. So it's gonna be in my second house. And as a Cancer, I'm in the 12th, right? So I could usually take her for granted because with Jupiter there, she wouldn't have no problems like making food for me or like giving me stuff, or because she's in my second house, I could also put her in a position where I can give her stuff. So it could be very easy to be used or in a good or bad way, depending on how it works. But planets like Jupiter will add evidence that one person has if it's in a second, or if Saturn is in a person's second, it could really constrict the quality of what that person gains. Saturn can make that person very critical about their own self-esteem, whereas Jupiter is going to make that person happy and vibrant, and the sun will make that person aware of what that person's like values truly are. The fifth house is really fun. When someone has planets in your fifth house, they stimulate a very fun sense of you. I know a Virgo sun with the Libra moon, and she has Venus and Mercury and all those energies in my 5th, and she's a very fun individual. She even involves herself and works in a place that would be considered 5th house to me, very fun. So, when you have people who stimulate the 5th, or when you stimulate people's 5th house, you stimulate a very creative part of themselves. And they're a lot more express their heart. They're a lot more willing to express their creative ideas and to bring out the fullness of their heart. As such, similar to the 7th, the 5th really works well for romance. And it also works well for building friendships, because you can develop your talents, have their planets there. Even a planet like Saturn that may constrict that quality, serious to do it around them, which could add more greatness and fervor to one's heart expression. The 8th house now is where things get really tricky. When someone has their planets in your 8th house, you as the 8th house person can develop an obsession, extreme hatred. There's a thin line between love and hate, and this is explored in the 8th, because the person who has their planets in the 8th house will also have a special psychic link with you. Whereas the 4th house synastry is a lot more, empathic. The person with planets in your 4th will kind of be able to sense when you're feeling off. The person in your 8th will kind of have a deeper connection with you, especially if someone has their moon in your 4th. If someone has their moon, if someone has their moon in your 8th house, that moon individual is, let me kind of step back. Both the moon and the house person are going to feel a sense of obsessiveness over each other, because the moon is going to be receptive of that darker part and complex part that the 8th isn't always aware of, whereas the 8th house person themselves can now be made aware of their vulnerabilities, especially if it's a sun and an 8th house person. This is going to engender a lot of trust here. Venus and Mars in the 8th house can trigger very carnal, sexual, primal feelings in the 8th house person. And what's important to keep in mind is it's the planet person who stimulates the house. So the way they express those energies in a way that makes the 8th house person very vulnerable, but also feel things that are quite deep. Okay, it's very important though, because with the influence of the 8th and 12th, there's a hidden element of this that can be quite hidden. Well, sorry, that was dumb. There's a hidden element of this that could be easy to deny. So you have to really be trusting and faithful of what you feel in certain instances. Mercury in the 8th, if someone's Mercury is in your 8th, it's very easy for them to know your secrets. Moon especially, when someone's moon is in your 8th, they will just intuitively know certain deep things about you. That's why you need to trust them, so you'll kind of understand where they're coming from. It's a very special position. Neptune, Uranus stimulates psychic energy here too, and you would imagine Pluto as well. But the name of the game for 8th house synastry is trust, because this is usually going to deal with the place where this person has exclusive access over important money you have, resources. So it does also lend to a unique sexual link that you can merge on a very deep, profound psychological level. But they definitely do have a psychological impact and influence on you. And of course, the 11th house will indicate the currency of friendship. So 11th house contacts and synastry are awesome, because they really look at how well you can network together. The sun, moon, Jupiter in someone's 11th house really does well to a great friendship rapport. I get along really well with moon and sun and Pisces people just because they're in my 11th house. And it really does well for not only getting along with them, but having them network for other people on your behalf. So Mars and Venus in someone else's 11th will talk about how your beauty or the actions you take actually add to someone else's networking, to who they connect with, because you'll be able to connect them to greater people in their social circle. This is what's actually awesome about 11th house contacts in synastry. Whereas if someone's Saturn is in your 11th, they can, at its worst, kind of block you from meeting other friends. They could be a bit jealous or restrictive. Or someone who has their Jupiter in your 11th, because of them, you'll meet a whole lot of people. You'll actually meet more friends and get to know more people. So it's actually pretty cool. But it speaks of a very awesome connection to where you can manifest a whole lot of your hopes and wishes through these contacts and with these contacts. So now once we get to the succeeding houses with the mutable signs, this is what allows us to delve into the power of the experiences we can gain quite powerfully and potently with these energies. When you have planets in the third house, or when someone has their planets in your third house, to highlight an awareness of your mind and your attitude. Third house contacts are really fun because these people love to talk. Find that it's very easy for you to relay your ideas, especially in the case of Sun or the Moon in someone's third house. Actually, that person will just kind of know what you're going to say before you say it, because the awareness of that person's idea, thinking with what you're saying before you did. So if someone's Neptune is in your third or Moon is in your third, this is another indicator of telepathy, and or Mercury in a certain sense. But whereas the Moon will feel what they're saying and Neptune will just psychically know, Mercury is already seeing. Mercury doesn't psychically know. Mercury can already kind of tell what words you're going to say, since it's just very, quick-minded. So Saturn in the third will make one's attitude very serious, and Jupiter will expand upon the quality of what the other person expresses. But once again, contacts to the third house will very greatly influence the other person's attitude. So if you're with a negative person and they're in your third house, their negativity can affect the way you think, and vice versa with positive. And this is even more prevalent in the sixth house. Contacts to the sixth house in synastry are actually the most important, in my opinion, one of the most important, because the sixth house is your behavior. So people in your life who heavily impact your sixth house heavily influence your behavior. You want a very positive aspect for the sixth is someone who has their Jupiter in your sixth or Venus in your sixth, because they'll add to your lifestyle, and the stuff they do will kind of fix up your routine so you can actually live one. So if you have a shitty sixth house like me, you want to find someone who has their Jupiter or Venus in your sixth, because then they'll actually take pleasure in helping you get your life in order. Contacts to the sixth house are next to the seventh because they speak of people, they speak of energies within people that align with your lifestyle, so that it talks of the quality of what happens when they're with you. So this is why it's great if Jupiter or Venus is here. Mars, they might clash with certain aspects of your lifestyle, but someone's Mars in your sixth are going to get you motivated to actually doing what you do, and then pretty aggressive. And the Sun is going to make you aware of what someone's lifestyle is. If your Sun's in someone's sixth, or someone's Sun is in your sixth house, they're going to make you aware of what your current lifestyle is and what needs to adapt and change. The outer planets, of course, will add their own funk and mystery to it, depending on the sign that it's in and the state and quality. Yeah, because of the behavioral impactfulness of these planets by another person in synastry, you have to make sure that the behavior of that person alone is something you admire. But now that you know, just be mindful. Anybody's planets in your sixth, or any of your planets in their sixth, are going to indicate quite profoundly how well you influence their behavior and how well you're able to kind of influence what they do on their day-to-day routine. All right. We bring this a step further into the ninth house, because synastry contacts to the ninth house speak profoundly of how people influence your beliefs. And this could be very inspirational. When someone's Mars or Venus or Jupiter is in your ninth, they could be very inspiring to you. They could just do things or kind of implement their love in ways that open up your mind to new beliefs. Okay. It does stimulate travel too, but people with energy in your ninth house will now probably most likely be from a different culture. I know that a lot of what you identify as fact will be challenged by people who have their moons or suns or Jupiters in your ninth. But this challenge comes with inspiration ultimately, because it definitely keys you into the ability to see bigger than where you're at. Even in some harsh cases, like someone's Pluto or Saturn in your ninth, it's still kind of in a serious way, making you look at your beliefs and see how it aligns with other facets of your personality, like your attitude or your lifestyle. So once again, planets to someone's ninth will really show either receptive or aware or can communicate what one's beliefs are. But just because they're in a ninth doesn't necessarily mean in alignment of, it just stimulates the awareness of all this energy. And again, of planets like Mercury or the moon or Venus, once again, like Uranus in the ninth, there's going to be a heavy stimulation of higher metaphysical concepts and just higher minded philosophy that could permeate itself in small talk. So you could be talking about the meaning of why something happened in a TV show. It doesn't necessarily always have to be abstract, like the physical concepts of hedonism or whatnot, but it is going to bring into account understanding what the ninth house person believes. And of course, the 12th house, synastry contacts to the 12th house really indicate quite mysterious and nebulous relationships. This kind of works in different ways. Like some of the coolest relationships you can have are with people in your 12th. But there's, of course, an unconscious hidden element here that can frustrate things. This is made very aware in Sun in the 12th, because the Sun person will be profoundly aware that the 12th house person is unconscious of. And the way a lot of this energy plays itself out could be in ways that add a level of secrecy that opens up a need for faith, because when people's planets fall in your 12th, you're going to know firsthand why, unless you have energy in the 12th that picks up on it. It's going to actually key you in to the divine aspects of them. This is kind of a different slant onto this. When someone falls into your 12th, you kind of see their divine sense with whatever planets that are in. But another manifestation of this, though, could be an unconscious sabotaging influence that that person places on you, or they kind of make you aware of that you do. Venus or Mars, especially, in a person's 12th house could indicate at a basic level, you know, expressing one's love or sex in a private way that's clandestine. But what this actually does vibrates at the level of the 12th house person's subconscious to deeply influence that person's spirituality and to deeply influence how that person kind of interacts on their own. This is what makes the 12th house really interesting, because the 12th house person, the person with the planets in that person's 12th house will be aware of or gain an understanding or energy of what that person is doing alone. So when someone is in your 12th house, the intuitive quality of that house can have them tune in to your own private spiritual feelings and energies, especially when someone's moon is in your 12th house. It's going to be hard for them to know why they kind of feel it, but they're going to feel into an unconscious facet of you, not necessarily be aware of. An application of this for Venus and the moon, because they're more feminine energies, is instead of that person expressing that energy, like if someone has their Venus in your 12th house, they're not going to tell you how they feel. As opposed to if they had their Venus in your 7th house, then they're going to express their love directly towards you. They're going to express their love in ways that balance you out. If their Venus is in your 9th house, they're going to express their love in ways that inspire you. In fact, what they love most about you are your beliefs. So they're going to really align their hearts with that. If someone's Venus is in your 8th house, it could inspire you to kind of be, you know, a bit sexual in the sense where you can't hold back certain feelings. But the 12th house, they're probably not going to tell you how they feel, especially if the moon is there. I've experienced instances where they have, but that was because of favorable and positive planets that opened up the communication for that. But and it could be vice versa too. Maybe it's the house person that doesn't say anything. But the secrecy and privacy of the 12th is to actually subconsciously honor the fantasy element of it. Because once you say something, it's no longer a fantasy, number one. And number two, there's a high intuitive link that 12 house planets share in synastry that help to blend and dissolve the whole understanding of even having an ego with it in the first place. This is where someone's Mars in the 12th could be a bit tricky, because it'll kind of calm down the Mars influence, but you know, it will also inhibit and kind of encourage that person not to be too uptight. Planets like Saturn can block a person's spirituality though, and it can get in the way of their lifestyle. But ultimately, that is how synastry of the planets. And now I'm going to pull up some astrology charts now, so we can look up some case studies and kind of also highlight good compatibility and challenging synastry aspects. Of course, after to pull up a synastry chart, tell you how to interpret the synastry chart. So let's go. Okay. Cool. Oops. All right, cool, y'all. So, as you can see, let me try it this way again. Oh, snap. Oh, there we go. Anyway, as you can see, we have Kanye West's chart, and we have Kim Kardashian. This is very cliche, but I wanted to highlight them first. And then we have Meek Mill and Drake, these two lovebirds. And then we have Nicki Minaj and Remy Ma. Just lightly go through these aspects real quick. So in the case of Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, this is a pretty cool chart to compare. Oh, wait a minute. Something's off. Yeah, this is not Kanye West's chart. This is not Kanye's chart. Who's this? All right. I'm going to find Kanye West's real chart. There we go. So we have Kanye and wait, who's this? This isn't Kim. Oh, this is Drake. This is weird. Let me get this right real quick. Talk about Mercury retrograde. Okay. One moment. All right, well, I'm having an issue loading these other two, which is weird, but okay, never mind. It looks like it's loading. Okay, looks like we have the real charts this time. So anyway, first we have Kanye and Kim. This is not a synastry chart, which I'm going to pull up, but when we study the synastry between these two, it's quite revealing, especially as you see certain key aspects. I'm going to point out certain positive aspects that stand out that could probably lend to the longevity of the connection these two share. One of which, of course, is the mutual moon sign reception. They are both Pisces moons. Even though they're not the same degree, we now do see that both of these people have the same energy in the moon signs, which is definitely great for a myriad of reasons, but also powerful being that both Kim and Kanye feel the same way about things. One is in Kanye's 9th house, and this is in Kim's 3rd house. So they both share that 3rd house, 9th house duality. And whereas Kim feels everything in a sense that stimulates Kanye's imagination and what he believes about it, Kanye's able to stimulate the ideas of how Kim is communicative of her feelings, or rather just emotional or imaginations. Now, of course, they also have a trine with their sons, adds positivity. But one thing that I didn't mention and wanted to save was the aspect that the nodes have in the play of this. So they both are in the Pluto and Libra generation, but it turns out that Kim has her sun on Kanye's North Node. So when we have nodal contacts in synastry, are very revealing, as it has much to do with how one's destiny interacts with someone else's destiny. And not only does it highlight how the destinies interact with each other, but it highlights in a more what really, it highlights in a profound way what really comes into play of, a lot of how we can and understand what we already do. Because of the karmic paths that influence the better half of where we're set to go, someone's planets kind of aligns with that, shows how aligned to your own karmic path they are. Where we now start to look into what to look for in a synastry chart. How well do they align with your personal planets, but how well do they align with your destiny? And the combination of all those factors really create a much greater awareness and possibility for all of us in question to experience quite grandly and profoundly the meant to be feeling and the feeling that this person is actually supposed to be on your path. So if someone's sun is on your North Node, they are your destiny. This is someone who literally opens and gives you the keys to your path. Their moon on your North Node is definitely talking to them, understanding your karmic path. They can support and they feel into it. And there's a magic there too, because the moon will give that person the secrets to their destiny path that'll be quite profound for them to implement. And then if someone's Mars or Venus or Mercury are there, this is going to stimulate through their actions or their love or their ideas ways to help you move forward on your destiny. But planets on it, even if it's Saturn, that'll make it constricting and give challenge, will push you forward to your destiny. Whereas South Nodal contacts speak of where this person could directly have been a past life influence, depending on the planet, but more so we'll talk to how they bring and activate and make aware the talents that you naturally came back with. So South Nodal contacts bring this familiarity to them where it feels good. Node contacts, there's a bit of an ease because you're having to stretch forth and develop qualities that you're destined to develop. All right. So I'm going to go back and show the compatibility. And then after I show the charts, I'm going to pull up the synastry chart, help you understand how to pull up the synastry chart and what to see. Okay. Let me see who I can find to put in here. All right, let me do this. But so far, as we've seen a moon conjunction and we've seen a sun trine, two very potent factors that align people's spirits and combine their souls in quite profound ways, if I may say so myself. So with that being said, let me see. Let's go back to the Peace Mobile. All right, yeah, I meant to do that. Okay. So we also see Kanye is a Jupiter head, and he has his Mars and Venus conjunct in Taurus. So when we look at sexual compatibility, we're going to want to look at Mars and Venus. With her Mars and Venus, she has her Venus in Virgo and her Mars in Sagittarius. All right, so this is great because we see that his Mars makes a trine with her Venus, which is very powerful in synastry. And his Mars and Venus is in her fifth. So this definitely sparks a very sensual enjoyment of stimulating her heart. Kanye is definitely someone who turns Kim on at a very sensual level. And with Mars, their Mars do clash though, but how ironic, Kim has her Mars on Kanye's Neptune, which is also on her rising. So his Neptune on her rising, which is also on a sixth house cusp, definitely gives them a psychic link. And she's more inclined to take actions in ways that he would have probably already intuitively known. All right, so the North Node definitely opens up his awareness of his karmic path, and her North Node is in Leo being activated right now. So one thing that's great about these two, they definitely were destined to link together, but what's important is that both of their karmas are aligned. They make sextiles. And of course, Kanye is an artist, right? And Kim Kardashian, with his Saturn on her North Node, definitely allows him to have a binding karmic contact with her, to where a lot of what he decides to aim for and manifest with his career goals aligns with her destiny, which is important because it's not always cool if someone's Saturn makes a negative aspect, because these are two karmic aspects. But both of these vibrant places that have much to do with entertainment and artistry link together. So they even walk very similar karmic paths, or karmic paths that, you know, once again align with each other. When we now look to more antagonistic cases, like say the case between Drake and Meek Mill, who had gone into some disagreements and beefs recently, the first thing that you'll see is, of course, that this features a profound opposition between a Scorpio and a Taurus. Especially if we look at the nodes, they're both the same generation. They're both born 87. So they both walk the same karmic path, but there's some clear clashes. Even though if you do look at this chart, they do have some stuff that could potentially help them get along. But, you know, we have both Sun and Mercury opposite Sun and Mercury. So especially when we look at fixed signs, the influence of Pluto is going to add a much harsher depth and intensity. So these two genuinely just don't like each other. Even when they work together, it probably must have been like on some business stuff. And that's not to say that they won't have the potential to, but then if you look at how his Mars, Drake's Mars also opposes Meek Mill's moon, this is another opposition that could get Meek Mill at a very emotional level, very passionate, to not really like Mars. And when Mars, or Drake, and when Mars opposes, someone's moon, it's going to really feature a lot of, pent up stuff. And look at this. His moon is in the 12th. So what did Meek Mill do? Meek Mill tried to expose some hidden secrets about Drake. So here you go. This is kind of where we're coming into this meaning. But okay, Meek has Neptune in Capricorn. So that's what opposes Drake's moon. So there's definitely some misunderstanding in how they understand each other emotionally. The semi-sextile effect of the moons definitely doesn't allow them to emotionally bond as well, and in the opposition. So yeah, this definitely does speak of quite profoundly, you could see and almost smell the tension, especially when Pluto is involved, which just kind of adds a lot of tension and intensity to a whole lot. They both have the same Saturns though, but as you can see, Meek's Mars opposes Drake's Saturn and Uranus. So this is also what's going to add to a lot of antagonizing qualities. Now, if we bring into account Remy Ma and Nicki Minaj, we see more similarities. Remy Ma is a Gemini. She has her Venus in Gemini. Nicki is a Sagittarius. She has her Venus in Sagittarius. So there's a clear opposition. Interestingly enough, though, Remy does have her Mercury on Nicki's North Node, but Remy's North Node is in Leo. So once again, we also have more karmic paths that are just not really intertwined or compatible at all in any way. Remy looks like she has a master Aries moon, so will clash with the Virgo moon, but I can see how they used to get along before because they do have a sun moon trine. But once again, as you can see, clear clashes here. Oops. Remy does have her Mars in Taurus, which could align with the Earth that Nicki does, but I just kind of wanted you to see firsthand the oppositions that occur and how they influence astrology. So now I have this astro chart. If you want to look up your synastry chart, I strongly recommend you use astro.com. They have the best resources for looking up synastry. You could choose the asteroids you want featured and also put in stuff here. If you need to look up numbers, you can find them. And then you go down to chart type. I'm going to look at the synastry I have with the Leo King. You're going to look at the chart type, and if you look at partner charts, you will see synastry chart. I like to do synastry chart with outer circle. So what this is going to do now is give me the natal chart of me and then juxtapose the synastry of the Leo King outside, which is amazing for various reasons, because this is also going to give you the AC and help you understand things over how the energies interlap. So this, my friends, is a synastry chart. All the stuff that we spent time learning right now was so that you can apply it to know how to read a synastry chart, and how to read a synastry chart has much to do quite profoundly, large way, with how you can interpret the conjunctions and the overlapping aspects that, of course, the red makes with the blue. And to color code this, of course, the red planets outside will interact with the red that you see here, okay? But with that being said, for example, if we're going to interpret the synastry chart, you now know based on this first house, David has his north node, his moon, and his Chiron in my first. Whereas I have all my first house energy in his 10th house. And he has his Venus and Sun on my south node. So right off the bat, you could actually see that we're both karmically intertwined. His north node's in Gemini, and my south node's in Leo. The important things that you want to really examine when you look at a synastry chart, of course, I spoke of moon sign compatibility. He has a moon in Taurus, I believe. I have a moon in Capricorn, and the sun sign compatibility. Sometimes you also want to look at how the sun interacts with the moon and how differences between the internal and external states will also play out. You want to, of course, then look at the nodes. That's very important to look at. Chiron is important as well. Chiron can really key in where one person could be a profound source of healing for another. He has Jupiter in Capricorn. I have Jupiter in Cancer. It's important to look at generational influences as well, because this will kind of let you know how much more mature someone else is than the other, or what lessons they're both learning and how they can both work on each other. And then outer planet conjunctions as well are auspicious. Then, of course, you know, looking into where each of the planets fall into what house add another level of understanding. But other than checking to see the moon sign compatibility and the aspects of planets, look to the north node, look to the major angles to see how they affect the major angles. After you've interpreted the house as well, you want to really focus quite profoundly on aspects to the vertex, and you will kind of gain a profound understanding of how both of your energies bond together. Determining which conjunction is going to be important for you or square is really personal to you, because you may find some aspects are more potent to you than others because you experience an aspect more potent. If you have a sun square moon, you may find that squares are more positive for you than conjunctions in a special weird way. So also keep that in mind as you really kind of go about your way understanding this compatibility, understanding how to operate within it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for your patience. Just kind of grateful we were able to repair the interference issue. Once again, is just very important for a myriad of reasons. I mean, if at least because you're just at a much profound able to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are, to balance, you'll really uncover profound secrets to derive and ascertain from all of these elements. All right. When dealing with very challenging aspects in synastry, want to really, first of all, align them with the North Node and see what's the purpose of this. If you have to deal with the harsh squares in someone, yourself, what is this difficulty teaching me about myself? What am I able to teach them about the harsh aspect? To take this mindful approach over difficult aspects, this allows you to now slow down and see a different way of perceiving this so that you're even in a more profound position to very powerfully and profoundly, you know, come into a greater understanding of certain things that were blind to you before in the past. And honestly make a challenging aspect amazing and favorable, where it'll still be challenging sometimes, but now you understand it a lot more. Okay. That being said, I'm just so grateful for y'all. I kind of feel a little bit disappointed that we kind of went through the complications that we did, but I thank you so much for your patience. I thank you so much for you guys also made this a very fun webinar as well. So definitely, how can I quantify? For those of you who are live, all right? For those of you who are live, who are watching this right now, oh, okay. If you do this after, I want to kind of give something special for those who are live. I'm going to end the webinar right here. What I want you to do for those of you with questions is to email me your question to thepeacedealer.com, and I will give you an email of this. But I want to give a code word for those of you who are live. So what you should do if you're live is to take your live name when you send me the email and say you were live and give me the live name, and I'm going to pull a card for you too. Just so I can also, it'll just be like a tarot card that I will interpret as well. Hope that is okay, because I will definitely, for those of you who watch after it's live, and I will answer the question. I think I can, hold on. All right. With that being said, thank you though once again for joining me this webinar. I'm going to find someone or work with someone who can help me timestamp what I said, and I will be putting it in the comments in each video. So I may not get to it immediately. So in future, the webinars that I do, we will not have any interference, thankfully, because this laptop seems to be very stable. And the PowerPoints will be ready. I will also, Colleen, just say that you were live, and just say what your username ID was, so I can definitely and then I'll pull a card for you. All right. But everyone else, if you weren't live, definitely, if you have a question, shoot me an email at thepeacedealer@gmail.com. And for those of you who were not able to do this part 2 and have anything, just email me, peacedealer@gmail.com. And yeah, so that being said, again for joining in another 30 minutes. A video that I started the night before, so I will be live again. And 2, thankfully we have found a way to circumvent getting interrupted. And yeah, I really appreciate your patience. Thank you so much for really sticking with me throughout this. And yeah, this is once again this is really just a basic Synastry webinar to give you a template. We will go more in depth webinar series where we will have PowerPoints and organized structures about. I'm going to go over a lot of concepts here again where I talk about more specific and case examples of how to perceive them, as well as more specifics over each planet and sign in the house in Synastry and in the sign. But that's the advanced compatibility course that we have to do after the composite. This is why I kind of just freestyled it. My Capricorn side loves more order, so the PowerPoints will be coming. It really touches my heart that some of you still like this, or that you still kind of enjoy this. I really hope you got what you paid for it. And I really hope you got the information and it really did help you. So that being said, please be sure to email me the questions, put that in the subject to webinar, and I totally got you. Y'all stay blessed, my friends, and until next time.